meeting of the Planning Commission. If you would all please rise and remove your hats and recite with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. All members present except Dan Keene, who is off with a brand new baby. Is there any other business items that are not here that you'd like added to the agenda? Nope. Okay, then can I get a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve list.
Just a second.
Discussion? Any discussion on the meeting minutes for the workshop or the meeting last time?
Discussion.
Have you all had a chance to go through the business license application?
Yeah,
Any questions on that?
none for me.
I didn't. Okay. Been a motion made and seconded. All in approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, before we really get the meeting going, something I was asked to read. A recent public records request highlighted an issue of non-compliance with the serving terms for the Planning Commission. The city has addressed this matter by reaffirming the Planning Commission chair. It is important to note that the Planning Commission serves as a checkpoint in the planning activities of your city. The commission provides valuable recommendations on items brought to their attention. However, final decisions and approvals regarding city planning rest with the city council. At this time, we'll open the public hearing on the Maple Street subdivision. Is Kurt here? Anybody representing KNR? Oh, hello there. How are you? Did you want to make a presentation at all?
No, I don't.
Did you
We
get
do have,
photos?
we do have pictures to show everybody of the buildings that we would like to put over there. We should have pictures of the duplex and also the two-story single family.
For those who weren't in attendance at the last public hearing, I will do a little background history on this. The home building firm KNR Homes had come to us earlier with a proposal to build a 12-unit, two-story high apartment building at the corner of 5th and Maple. Since that time, they have adjusted their application to a proposal for a 7-lot small subdivision with 2 duplexes and 4 new single-family homes. There's an existing family home there now, so that would be 5 and 2. Is that correct?
Three new single family homes.
Oh, 3 new single-family houses and 2 duplexes. That's right.
Someone needs to guide me on which photos you want displayed when.
Sure, yeah, so this is the duplex. Each unit is 1,296 square feet. Upstairs bedrooms, there's 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms. Single car garages, good for starter home families. It's got a fireplace inside, downstairs in the living space, electric fireplace, and we switch over to the other photos to the 2-story single family home.
That one of them?
That's a duplex.
It'll be blue.
Okay, those are the only images that I have, there are 4 of them.
So Chair,
Yeah,
Chair
yes.
Birch,
Yes,
We don't see any changes on the top.
Oh, nothing's
So
changed.
they're not approving the buildings, just the plat, it's a set
Correct.
plat. So,
this is, this hearing is for approval of the plat only
right,
for the small subdivision.
so it's. At this point, it's not relevant what the applicant is intending to build, because once we've approved the plat, they can build whatever they want, there's no.
Correct.
There's no restriction on that. So tonight's hearing is on a 7-lot subdivision. To subdivide and leave 1 remainder home, so you'll have. A total of 7 lots. Where before you only had 4 lots. So you're increasing the number of lots for housing. The applicant submitted information that shows that the houses could meet setbacks within there, but that's the only criteria that we have at this point. What the houses look like or may be portrayed as isn't a requirement of this approval. So should we choose to give our approval on the, should you all choose to pass along a recommendation for approval to council? There's nothing that guarantees that any of this will be built, but certainly it does go to character. I know at the onset, the apartment project was a little bit different. In that was a development review, so we were in fact approving the building. In this case, it's a subdivision approval. So, while it's nice to know what the applicant intends to build, it should be looked at in that frame of mind only.
This just allows KNR to move forward.
The subdivision allows them to move forward with building permits, so
Right.
if the subdivision's approved, then they can then go and get building permits and go through the building permit process. Where the character of the homes would be an issue.
Okay, part of our package was a series of. Call them anything else, would be a lot of hoops that they had to jump to get to this point. Which was complying with SEPA. Complying with stormwater.
Erosion control,
I'm sorry?
erosion control.
Erosion control, et cetera. Which they have done and met all the criteria for that.
There were some outstanding items that we noted in our review that hadn't yet been addressed, so we're just making those conditions of approval.
Right, I saw those in the list of the conditions. Did you want to go over those?
I can if you'd like me to. Certainly, the information they provided shows that the plat can comply. This is a preliminary plat approval. So what we'll do here is we'll approve the plat, then they'll go out and they'll construct the infrastructure as needed. They'll put in the water and sewer connections for the lots. And then they'll come back with a final plat approval, and then the city will accept the final plat. That usually just goes right to council. Doesn't stop at planning commission, but the preliminary plat is the one that conditions it, saying you must do these things if you want to divide the land. So before the city accepts the final plat, the conditions of approval that we put on tonight. And that will be accepted by council at their next meeting will be. That'll be binding on the division of the land. They'll have to comply with those, then they'll come back to council with the final plat saying, see, we did what we were conditioned to do. And now, please accept the plat for recording. Once that plat's recorded, then they can come back in and apply for building permits. So that's the process from here on out. I can go through the conditions of approval, Chair Birch, if you'd like, but they are in the staff report, so I can just answer questions if you have any.
Well, we have a lot of people here and I'm sure they haven't read them and I think they would like to hear it. So if you don't mind, I would.
I don't mind at all.
How many items are there?
There are 11
11.
conditions of approval.
Do you wanna have them go over the ones that they haven't met, or do you want them to go over the ones that they have met, Chair?
I think let's go ahead and just take them by own number and go through them.
Alrighty,
There's not that many.
Yeah, so we as staff have reviewed this. Mike Johnson, the city's consulting engineer, is also on with me tonight, so if there are any engineering questions, he could address those. And basically, as conditioned, the subdivision can comply with our requirements for flats in the city. The recommended conditions of approval that staff had prepared was that they're going to need covenants and restrictions to be filed to establish a homeowners association before the sale of homes, ensuring mandatory membership and financial responsibility for maintenance of the stormwater facilities. And any other public amenities within the proposed subdivision among the homeowners. They're proposing a joint use stormwater facility through the backyards of the lots. So that requires some sort of a maintenance and they all have to be responsible for maintaining it. That won't be a city owned facility. So we need to make sure that it's gonna maintain function so that way the stormwater works. There were also a list of SEPA mitigation measures in the May 17, 2024 SEPA. Those were adopted specifically to mitigate for environmental impacts as part of the SEPA determination. So we're adopting those as part of the subdivision determination. They have to comply with the minimum lot sizes in the zoning, which is a minimum of 3,000 square feet. They also have an approved variance that they sought from council earlier this year, late last year, and council approved that variance, allowing them to use the higher density zoning for some of the lots while maintaining lower density for others. The existing residents in the duplexes will be on the bigger lots. Erosion and sediment control. They hadn't really prepared a detailed construction plan at this point, so what we're doing is we're requiring that when they do that they show compliance with erosion and sediment control regulations. Utility improvements, again, they prepared a schematic of how they could comply, but construction documents are required for that. We're requiring them to extend water and sewer services to the site as required by the Land Development Code. We've got street and sidewalk improvements, which as part of the initial review, it was determined that sidewalks on all four sides probably wasn't needed, and that would create a block that was out of character from the rest of downtown. So we're requiring sidewalks on the north and south blocks, but not on 5th and 6th streets. And that way the connection to the park will have a sidewalk provided to the park and the school. But along the other frontages, no sidewalks are required. And that also was conditioned because they're deleting the sidewalks along those other frontages. A condition of SEPA was that they provide the police department with a fund that will allow the police department to buy a state authorized radar unit. So that will increase enforcement of speed and traffic laws and in mitigation for the deletion of the sidewalks. A lot on that one. But I see I duplicated the one here, that all the required SEPA mitigation measures must be implemented. So there are 2 duplicate conditions. The public safety mitigation fee is that fee in lieu of the sidewalks. The developer must pay a one-time fee of $8,000 to the city for use by the police department to buy the radar units. The school district last year has adopted school impact fees. The city has not yet adopted those, but we're applying them as conditions of approval on development. So we're requiring them at the time of final plat to show us some evidence from the school district that they've satisfied the school's adopted school impact fees. Floodplain compliance, the future building permits have to demonstrate compliance with the floodplain regulations because that whole area is within a floodplain. So there are construction techniques that will allow that. They just have to show how they're going to do it before they can get a building permit. And that will remain a condition on the lots as they continue. And then there were a number of conditions and recommendations outlined in the June 10th memorandum, which is also attached from the city's consulting engineer relating to specific construction elements that must be demonstrated on the construction plans and implemented prior to final plat approval. Those were the conditions that we had in the staff report. Mike, did you have anything to add to those or any specific discussion you thought might be relevant?
No, I think you covered it with the description of the conditions of approval. From an engineering standpoint, it's fairly straightforward. And I think that they've demonstrated, that they can comply with the engineering requirements. There's just providing a little more detail prior to construction. They should be able to make that.
Thank you, Mike. So then we did attach to the, as Chair Birch mentioned, we did attach the SEPA checklist that they completed their project narrative, the subdivision application form that they prepared, as well as a current copy of their plan set, copy of their engineer's stormwater technical memo showing that the stormwater facilities that they're proposing are feasible. This meeting had previously, due to my error, had been scheduled for June 19th, which was a holiday. So we had to renotice and reschedule the public meeting for this date. So I've included that in your packet as well. And then the variance approval from City Council dated January 16th of 2024 is included in there. And then the memo from Gray and Osborne is included as part of it.
Do you have any questions? Do we have enough public input?
That
We're gonna open this up to public input. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. We do not allow dialogue between members and no arguing amongst yourself. If you want to raise your hand, I don't think we need to have a sign-up sheet unless you've already got one going.
It would be convenient if they stated their name.
Yeah.
For the
But
record.
please state your name and we'll go.
Lance Galstoy, are these intended to be owner occupied?
To my knowledge, well, they're rentals, so I believe
Even the single family homes will be rentals?
they're gonna be rentals. Yeah.
Well, and there's no condition of approval on, this is a land division.
This is the.
Yeah, I don't think that's really been decided, if they're gonna be rentals or if they're gonna be. for
This
doing
is
it.
for the subdivision plat only, so
And lot sizes are 3,000 square feet. What is the minimum?
4,000.
And how do we do that?
The variance.
We traded that for a speed radar?
This was done by city council back last year
3,000 square feet.
to mitigate, yes.
And the trade-off was a speed radar.
No, that's not the trade-off for that was public safety.
But you guys agreed to allow them to have.
I was not part, I'm not part of council, so I didn't answer that question.
Planning commission, we had 3,000 square foot lots. With 4,000 square feet.
That was the council.
So I went to council for a variance request and council approved the variance.
Back
So
in January.
4,000 is the minimum unless we can agree it can be small.
You're welcome. I mean, any citizen is available to file a request for a variance for the
Small
city.
and four, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're aware of this, but the state has mandated,
To 2,000.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
state has mandated that we also allow ADUs on current single family lots. So essentially, if you wanted to build another house on your lot, you could. So
And then that lot could be sold.
if you subdivided it, you could,
Yeah,
as long as you maintain the minimum square footage is you can do what you want, because most of these lots are 8,000 square feet.
But these
These are 3.
Yeah.
But last year, I mean, 2 years ago, when we redid the land division codes, we changed that, and so the minimum lots were 4.
right.
Correct, so if you have an 8,000 square foot lot and your home is sitting on one corner of it or one half of it, and you decide you want to subdivide it. And sell the lot or subdivide it and build a house and sell the house, you're certainly within your rights to do that.
I was just trying to clarify.
So in
Smaller.
And it wasn't about the radar.
And the variance that allows the 3,000 square foot lots is a variance to allow this project to be processed as a cluster subdivision.
Right.
Which allows the 3,000. So when they asked for the variance, the cluster subdivision normally requires at least an acre of property, which they have just a little over ½ acre of property. And they asked to implement the cluster subdivision provisions for this development rather than the standard zoning, which allows the 3,000 square foot lots. So council approved the variance to use the cluster provisions. The cluster provisions allow the 3,000 square foot lots. Just to be clear about the process that was approved. And the cluster provisions can be applied to 1 acre lots without a variance.
Where can we obtain that in writing? Is there an annual as far as the rules for subdividing?
The city zoning code is
It's
online,
Is all-
as is the land development code.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go to this, if you just Google City of Toledo, Washington, land use codes, it comes right up and it's searchable.
And that'll explain all of this.
Mhm.
Perfect. Thanks.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my concern is they're gonna have to fill those lots. I mean, they'll bring it up to grade, because it's in the floodplain. Are you bringing in any fill?
When we landscape, there will be topsoil brought in, which will bring up the fill. So when I set these foundations, they're gonna be taller foundations, right, to meet the codes for the floodplain.
But are you, but
So,
that all flooded in 96, and so you're gonna fill that all in, that little part in that lot, towards the park?
yeah, it's gonna have at least a 2%.
So where is that water gonna go when it floods again? Is it gonna come onto my lot?
Yes. Good
Am I
question.
you're
Water
gonna be
goes somewhere.
responsible for that, my flooding on my ground?
Do we have any catch basin systems in the road?
We do not.
No, that's my concern.
Yeah, okay,
Because it did flood back in the day.
yeah, so do
This is
we,
Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
duly noted, I will look into that to make sure that that doesn't happen too.
I'm surprised that wasn't in the CBA.
So the applicant did submit a grading plan that specifically shows the finished floor elevations of all the buildings. And that is part of you can get a copy of that from the city.
But
If you request it.
That's fine, but I'm just saying, is that gonna affect my property?
They're,
Is that gonna put me into flood insurance?
they are, it is not going to affect whether or not you're in the floodplain.
Okay.
It will, and through the review, through the final engineering plan review, they have to demonstrate that they're not concentrating flows onto neighboring properties or discharging at a greater rate. Mike, you want to offer anything more on floodplain or fill for this project?
So there's really two different things that we're maybe talking about. One is just regular stormwater. Rainfall that comes down and hits the site and currently maybe percolates in the ground. In the future, if you have buildings or sidewalks or driveways that may not percolate into the ground as well, they will be required to infiltrate a certain amount of their new stormwater runoff into the ground to try to minimize impacts to surrounding properties. So that's in your, let's say your regular rainfall events when there's not flooding occurring. Flooding, will happen due to, longer duration, higher volume rainfall events, and will typically be generated by, the river rising up and causing either the river exceeding its banks or causing drainage ways that drain to the river to back up and then rise up water levels in the town. Building a structure above ground isn't necessarily going to cause the flooding elevations in other parts in the adjacent area to change. That is caused by more global area, wider area effects from the river coming up. So I think the more important concern that we can control is just making sure that the regular rainfall events are infiltrating into the ground and not causing problems on neighboring properties. And I think they've demonstrated that they can reasonably achieve that, and they'll provide more detailed engineering plans before construction of doing that.
But whenever you fill a lowland, that water's gonna go somewhere,
Yes.
where it's normally settled there as a pond. Then you fill that water is gonna go somewhere other than where it used to go.
This is true.
Let me get a calculator.
Yes,
And a lot of that is controlled by the river level too, in the lower end of town. You're aware of that, right?
yeah, no, we're aware of, you know, what the floodplain maps look like and what the impacts of the river have been on, you know, flood events in the past.
Right.
But it's not gonna, you know, developing on this particular parcel will not necessarily have a substantive impact on flood events in the surrounding area. It will have some impact, but it will be very difficult to measure. You know, it'll be less than, you know, less than an inch of impact on surrounding areas. It's just, you're not, that's being controlled more by the volume of water that's in the river that's, you know, finding a place to go because it's outside of its banks. That filling that particular block or putting buildings on that particular block will not have a substantive impact on the surrounding properties in a flood event.
I disagree with you.
disagree
Is
too.
that your
It
opinion?
does,
That's always been a pond there when it's wet, this piece of property's always been a settling point for water. And I get what Tom's asking, is if he fills that area up, that water is gonna move to the neighboring lots. Because in history, you can drive by that any time of the wet time in the winter time, and that up by there, it's water. And it is, it's a low area that holds water. Neighbors' concerns about if we raise that soil up, that water is gonna go to the next lots. Especially without us.
Potholes, so you got drive by potholes or full of water, you on the potholes, there's no water.
This is a higher volume.
Well, it's kind of like this, if you spread the 1,300 yards of fill, I think they're anticipating over 60 acres, it's like 4/100ths of an inch. So I don't think those 1,300 yards are gonna adversely affect the neighborhood.
But I agree, you put something there, it's gonna make the water go somewhere else.
It's gonna go some.
Yeah, so then no one's arguing against that. Everybody understands the
We
physics of water.
understand the concept, but
Yeah.
the
So it's that water going into.
effect
people's
is so
basement?
small
Because
as to be
A lot of
negative.
the older houses down there, the foundations are up
Yeah,
to code.
it's good.
Well, are you in the flood map now? Are you in the floodplain now?
yeah, it's all in the floodplain down there.
We all.
And that's why they need the floodplain permits for the structure when they come in for
But
building
that
permits.
does, then you have to have flood insurance.
So you already have flood insurance.
We're right on the border. I just have one to make sure that it doesn't change that.
It,
Eric knows.
it will not change that.
Okay.
It doesn't change the base flood elevation for the basin. They have to demonstrate that in order to get a permit to build these things.
Yeah.
That's part of
That's
the,
fine, that's,
it,
answers my question.
it's obviously going to have some impact, but they can't have an
That
impact
water, once that's filled, it's gonna go somewhere else.
Yes,
without a doubt,
Yeah,
but they cannot,
that's the point I was making.
they have to demonstrate that it's not gonna have any significant change in the base flood elevation, which is what sets those lines. In order to get approval for their building permits, that's a requirement, so.
The only way you're gonna find that out if we have another flood,
Mhm.
like we did in 96.
Or 07.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? No further comment? Yes, sir.
Eric Hayes, I I have some interest on the HOA, I wasn't expecting to see that. Maybe some words could be spoke on that, after talking about it.
So the HOA is a requirement of your code when you're proposing a shared amenity that needs maintenance or other obligation. So the HOA doesn't have to regulate anything more than a shared responsibility for the maintenance of the stormwater facility that's on private property. Because should portions of that stormwater facility be filled in, then it will concentrate flooding on neighbors' property and the facility won't function. So there has to be some agreement among all those homeowners as to how that facility will be maintained to function as a storm facility and how maintenance of it will be funded. There's not a lot of ongoing maintenance of those things, but there is maintenance. They tend to get silted in overtime or other things that decrease their function. So that's the sole reason that a homeowners association is required in this case.
I see a lot of HOA insanity on YouTube, and we've seen on Facebook what people are below. So it would be nice when the HOA is created, that it's very specific, and we don't start having things like Victoria Resort.
That would be entirely up to the applicant. There's nothing that the city, other than requiring one for the maintenance of the stormwater facility. There's really no limitation that we can put on the subdivision to prohibit them from requiring crazy things if they want.
But you get to read that before you buy your house. So.
That's true.
Is it true?
Thank you.
But
Alice Brown, I have a question on the stormwater thing. Can you give us just a brief sense of what your plan is for this? Is it just a depression in the ground you're gonna have to shovel out, or what's the deal?
Mike, did you want to address Chair Birch? Is it okay if we address that question?
Yeah, they were proposing infiltration facilities, so essentially digging infiltration trenches that would infiltrate the water into the ground, so that it's not exceeding the runoff rates that are currently seen from that property.
So can you maybe just for everybody's benefit, describe what an infiltration trench is? Is it just a depression in the ground, or is there more to it?
Well, it's a trench dug into the ground with gravel and perforated pipe to help distribute the water across a wider cross section of the ground.
Will there be surface water?
Will that be surface water? I mean, it will be water that's collected from driveways, rooftops, that goes into those trenches.
I think the question is are they storing it in a pond on the surface?
No,
So all that will go into the ground.
yeah, it'd be underground.
Yeah, okay.
You mentioned the pipe, perforated pipe, below the gravel. Does that pipe go anywhere, or is it just cut
Maybe
off
cat.
the edge of the property?
No, it just stops on the property there, and it's just a way to distribute the water over a wider area underground.
Even more time to articulate.
So when there are, if you're interested in the details on that, it was part of the applicant's submittal. So it's part of the city record that you can get that at City Hall as part of the plans that they submitted. That kind of shows the details, and also on the plan that they showed, it shows roughly where those will be on the property.
anybody else?
I have just one more question. On the 3,000 square foot variance, you have to run it by the planning commission.
I don't.
Yeah,
That-
with your planning and then there's
Was I
city
here?
council.
That came before planning commission for a recommendation, but council's the decision maker.
Huh?
On
Did
this.
you guys make a recommendation?
I'm staff. I'm sitting up with planning commission tonight, so I'm a consultant for them, but this planning commission did make a recommendation
Oh,
to
the planning
council.
commission did
Yes, they,
recommend
yeah,
variance.
yeah, they made a recommendation to council and council accepted the planning commission's recommendation for approval. And again, the variance was for the use of the cluster lots. So all the standards in the cluster provision are allowed, but the piece that the applicant's using that is most noticeable is the 3,000 square foot lots versus the 4,000. And even that really isn't that significantly noticeable when you're out there on the ground. It's kind of hard to tell the difference of 1,000 square feet, but
I can address that directly. So when I was on planning commission, we reduced the lot size of 4,000, right, to encourage infill, and that was a change from a do anything to stop any growth anywhere. And the thing that we had missed was a 1 acre subdivision to be allow this is too large to fit. Just like saying you could divide your lot down 8,000, there is no lots that could do that. Similarly, we're very short on lots that are as large as an acre.
So it's a 1 acre lot, it can.
You could have already.
Yeah.
This wasn't a 1 acre lot.
Right, so
Maybe.
So we cut it down to in this case to 0.65.
Doesn't set the precedent. City.
I think it's a precedent we probably don't mind. It's good for Toledo. This construction is good for Toledo. It's a lot better than the 3-story 12-plex that was proposed originally. And we do appreciate the.
Well,
the ability-
because we have lots in town, that's my question.
Yeah.
And as I recall, planning commission was very specific in that they did not want to set a precedent. So we crafted the conditions and the findings very closely to show that because of its proximity to public open space and other elements. So this, so we didn't really set too much of a precedent, unless some project comes in that meets the exact same conditions that were presented here. Each one of them has to be considered independently anyway, based on the merit,
Right.
and since you're asking for a variance, they are discretionary. So nothing says that council would ever have to grant the same variance again, but just to prevent against that, I think. When planning commission discussed it, they wanted to be very sure that this didn't set precedent across the city. So we had very specific findings in there that not many other properties
So
would meet.
that's it, that was in the minutes.
That is all in the planning commission minutes. It would have been probably the December last year planning commission.
Thank you.
So just to clarify on that, if it's a 1 acre piece, then it doesn't have to go through a approval process to be done with 3,000 square foot.
That's correct. So the variance was just to allow those standards to apply to a smaller lot.
So the current city, sewer system, I guess you call it, will handle all of this without expansion.
They're required. Can I
Yeah,
continue?
please do.
I'm sorry, Chair Birch. I feel like I can
Sorry.
answer these questions, so I'm just jumping right in here, but it is your meeting and I don't wanna.
No, you can, hang high at all you want.
Sorry. Yeah, so they're going to have to extend the services, but there's no big global changes needed to the sewer system. There's capacity in the system already. So other than some extension of the sewer lines and water lines, that's all that's required to do.
So when the development going west of Toledo,
Mhm.
you won't have to expand their treatment plant.
That one still fits.
That still fits.
It'll be the next one.
It'll be the next one, Joel.
It'll be-
The stormwater that we're talking about now doesn't go to the wastewater treatment center, and other stormwaters do go to the wastewater treatment center.
Well,
But they're not supposed to, yeah.
The state is local.
This stays, yeah, exactly, yeah, but, so that's less impact on it.
Yeah.
From the percolating.
I think it's, as it stands right now, we're in a position where we could actually mirror our current
Uh-huh,
wastewater treatment plant. We have the available space. We could actually mirror it without having a real issue. And I think that that's probably gonna happen after the first subdivision. And then the current annexation application that has indicated they want to develop residential lots would then be asked to participate in expanding the sewer treatment plant.
325 solar houses for about 45 to 50% of usage on the sewer.
We are very keenly aware of our limited resources and how we gotta plan for them in the future to make sure we don't get overwhelmed.
especially the sewer.
Yeah, Joe.
Yes, Joe?
So in what way specifically is this good for the city?
So for us. Chair Birch, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah.
So for a subdivision approval, it's about meeting the requirements in zoning. There is no, it's a discretionary application under the land use code, which means if they meet the requirements, the city has to approve it. In this case, they've demonstrated that they meet all the requirements that are in your zoning and land use codes. So absent finding something that's not consistent with your zoning and land use code, it is structured for approval. I think the only,
Was your question, Joe, really what's the subdivision do for the city?
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, it gives us additional residents in the city. It gives us additional input financially into the school district and the police department. Ultimately, when the fire department gets its impact fees together, those will also in future subdivisions of the fire district. And traffic mitigation, once those are established, the same thing, we'll have impact fees on all construction. In this particular instance, they're a little bit before everything, the cart, got here, but they're still going to be participating with the school impact fees, which are not inconsiderable. They're,
How much are those gonna be per year?
I believe the city, the schools are asking for $15,000 a door. So it's not a small amount of money, and
And that's been approved by the city.
we
It is
don't
not.
approve those.
As-
And then in additionally, you also get the monetary value of the hookups for storm and sewer, which are not inexpensive, as everyone here knows. And additional service, yes, additional customers for city services, which help offset costs, then, so they're not passed along to the remaining residents.
7 families shopping in our stores and.
And 7 more families shopping in our stores and visiting our businesses. So yeah, I think it's a major plus. Any other questions? Then I will bring this hearing to a close. Thank you very much for attending. It's nice to see faces out there. Usually there's like one, Joe and Ron, and that's
And
it.
it's always nice to see both of them.
Couldn't see you back there. You're behind a big guy. Okay, well, let's begin the regular planning commission meeting. And first on the agenda is the Maple Street subdivision recommendation to city council. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussions?
We've had some.
Yeah, they've met all the criteria, and I don't think from a legal standpoint, we're in a position to say no. So I think we just vote on it and get on with it.
Mhm.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Housing needs assessment discussion. Do you ever think Toledo would need a housing needs assessment discussion? Ever?
Give me a minute to switch screens here and I can give you a quick staff report on what this is. Oh, thank you. So as you all are aware, the city is in the middle of updating our comprehensive plan, which is the large planning document that guides the planning decisions that are made within the city for the next 20 years. One of the elements of that we've already looked at was the land capacity analysis and talking about that and what capacity we have for growth and whether or not we need to expand our urban growth areas. Another thing that we need to look at is looking at the housing that's available in the city of Toledo to see if there's a sufficient amount of housing. And with this comp plan update, the state is also requiring us to look at different income levels for housing. This is the first time in the state of Washington we've done this, but every community across the state that does comprehensive planning is required to do that. So what we did is we looked at the demographics of the area, we looked at the housing that's available in the area, we looked at the types of houses. We looked at the different income levels that were represented by the census. A lot of this is based on US Census data and other housing reports to see if Toledo would not only have a sufficient amount of housing within the city now to serve the existing population at different income levels, but also looking into the future for future population growth over the next 20 years. And when we look at that, we also looked at because Toledo has a very permissive zoning for residential housing. You allow all densities of zoning in one residential zone. So if you're not getting a higher density, lower income housing being built, it's not because of zoning. And that was one of the big findings in our housing needs assessment, is that you're not over regulating your housing market and preventing different housing types from being built by your zoning code. So changes in your zoning code won't really affect the marketability or livability of or the income brackets that your housing will serve. So we have to look to other controls and mainly focusing on statewide incentives at the state level, being able to offer support for those for rental assistance and for development incentives for lower income housing. Mainly focusing on state level efforts in those areas. But then also looking at some of the areas that we're going to have to expand our urban growth boundary into to serve the future population. To see if there's opportunities in that area to provide for some higher density zoning that's reserved for only the higher density or lower income housing. So, looking to the future, those are some of the tools that we identified using in this draft of the document. And so the basic conclusion is that there aren't any restrictions in town that prevent the types of housing from being developed that would serve the population. There's just not enough of it. So we need more land in our urban growth area to provide the housing that we need. For the different income levels, there's really no zoning or land use control that we have that is going to change that. So to be an advocate for state policies and programs that help to provide for housing affordability and housing and lower income housing development. So because of our location and because of our existing demographic that we have in the community, Toledo it is and should be recognized as a lower cost housing alternative for some of the major metropolitan areas. So I think we're doing something right in keeping our housing costs low, while the other areas are benefiting from that. And that is going to just lead to increased growth and pressure as people get priced out of those other markets and continue to look for housing here, which again circles right back around and supports the need for more land for housing. So that's a summary of the report in general. If you'd like to know more specifics about that, I did spend a lot of time researching and going through all these different elements.
Is this document online?
This document is not yet, well, I guess it is because it's part of our planning commission packet now.
Yeah.
So it is on tonight's planning commission agenda. If anybody would like to read that, it should be available there.
We could also pull it out separately as well. For the lessons.
John, when I read through that, and I did actually read through it, I just can't remember any of it without looking at it again. But it just seems to me that we really are on target to meet those state requirements. Not because of something we did, it's by default. We have a lot of inexpensive housing available in Toledo, just because we do.
That's very true, and that is what the analysis showed, is that comparatively, Toledo does serve a broader range of income levels than most metropolitan areas, most cities.
And now with the addition of the Cowlitz Prairie development, or Cowlitz
Meadows.
That increases the rent even more. There'll be a little more expensive houses, probably not less expensive houses, but there will be more housing available.
But even, well, and I don't know what the price point, none of us do until we see the stickers go up, but based on what we've heard, the comparative to other metropolitan areas, even for a new home on a single family home on an individual lot, those will be affordable, more affordable than they will be in other communities throughout the state. So
Can I play devil's advocate just a little bit?
please do.
Okay.
It's your meeting. I'm sorry.
Well, I think we're a result of 20 years of not really much doing of anything to encourage growth. And so the problem we're going to face in the future is that as people are priced out of those higher priced markets, the income level of the people that are priced out is going to rise, and people are going to be willing to pay more to come down here. And I think you're gonna see us, I hope it's slow, but it probably will not be slow. To where we do not meet those criteria anymore and very quickly. You know, the current housing that we have here, the average house is over 30 years old. You know, not to mention the single wides that we have on some lots that are. At least that old, it seems like. But. That's not gonna prevent somebody with money from coming in and buying a lot and building an $800,000 house. And that's going to go directly in conflict of what our methodology or our intent was. And I think that the public deserves the right to know, because they were here anyway when we were having our zoning workshop, that it's inherent upon the planning commission and thus the city council to look forward to preserve as much of the downtown core in its current format, so that it maintains that character that we all love about the city of Toledo, and take our issues that we can take and push them out into our UGA, so that we can, it gives people from the other lying out jurisdictions a place to go. But it doesn't come in and price out the people who already live here, who are then essentially cannot afford to live where they're living right now. And that's what your planning commission is trying to do in an intelligent manner, rather than just throwing housing up everywhere. And that's part of our zoning workshop, is to try to figure out a way to maintain the status quo as long as possible for our current residents, but giving options to people coming into town, so that they don't first thing off their mind say, I'll go buy a lot in downtown and raise it. I mean, it's not hard for somebody to spend $150,000 for a lot with a single wide on it, tear the single wide out. And we've seen in a couple instances here where some rather large homes have been built downtown recently. And it could all end up like that, and all of a sudden, we're not talking $300,000 homes anymore, we're talking about $800,000 homes. And all of a sudden, Toledo doesn't have that character anymore. We're trying to prevent that. So bear with us if you can, but we're trying to do this as intelligently and with as much forethought as we can. But that's what the workshops, and that's what we're attempting to do for the city. Okay. Any questions on that?
I haven't any part of that, but I hope you guys are kind of looking at where you want the high density housing to be in the overall. Right. Versus like kind of what we got with this deal is, oh, let's slap this right here. And then a couple houses down, we might go another apartment building, versus let's look at the areas that make the most sense to have the higher density housing.
Well, we're attempting to do the latter of what you speak right now. We had our workshop, we'll be continuing to have workshops before planning to determine where best to place those zones to have the kind of impact that we want to have, rather than throwing something on the Second Street that doesn't belong there.
Good.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. My name's Heather Thurman. I live outside of the UGA, like on the border. So for me, I just wonder, how will that kind of be mitigated for property owners that are now going to be on the edge of the city? When right now I can see this sunset, like 360 in my house.
How will what be mitigated?
Because in 10 years, there will be probably 400 out, 200 house, I don't know, right in front of my property. So I wonder if there will be any mitigation, like a fence or trees or, something, so that my backyard doesn't become their yard. Like a position.
Without knowing exactly where you live, I can't speak to that.
I just wonder if it's being considered for those landowners.
I can see that.
In that instance. I don't oppose the. other
You're
side.
outside of the current UGA?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm right at the edge of Tom's property.
I'm sorry.
right at the edge of Tom,
Okay,
I'm like right over. from here. Somewhere. They bought the winter's property. Yeah, it's right by the winter's property.
right.
Oh,
If you have an idea, speak up.
no, no, I have no, I'm just kind of zeroing in on where she lives.
Like, it definitely is, it's just like here.
Yeah.
Just go straight. So where's the?
I'm-
Did you want to speak, Mr. Layton? Mr. Layton,
Yes,
while they're talking, do you want to talk?
no, I don't want to talk. I want a definition of low income.
Of what?
The state's definition of low income,
Okay,
if there is such a thing in there.
There is, and for that one, I will have to look back.
How do you meet that? That's.
Well, it's a percentage of the median income within your census community.
So it could go up, the low income could go up. As your median goes up.
That's correct. Yep,
Okay. But is there a level now in Toledo?
Toledo's median household income is $50,000.
50,000.
50.
That's
So I guess
median.
if you're below that, you're lower income.
yeah, and they have a,
But how do you provide housing? So you can only sell your house for 100,000, so 200,000 to fulfill this low income.
so.
no,
So that's what the report generally showed. In a lot of areas, they have more restrictive zoning. So they'll have single family zoning that says you have to build this type of, you can only have 6,000 square foot lots. So if you have a single family zone and you don't have a lot of multifamily zones, which are looked at as being more affordable because they provide for apartments and condos and other things that are typically less expensive than single family homes. So if your zoning is out of balance and you don't have enough multifamily zoning and you have a lot of single family detached zoning, then your housing cost compared to your average median income or adjusted median income is higher, right? Because you're only offering one housing product in your community because of a result of zoning. What the report that I did showed is that that's not true in Toledo because you only have one zone. You allow all densities of zoning. It's just that nobody is building apartments and the other types of housing here, but it's not a result of your zoning. As it is in other communities. Other communities may not have enough of a stock of zones that will do that. So at a statewide level, they said, we have to analyze this because we have to figure out why Seattle doesn't have any affordable housing. You know, why are people priced out of these markets? I unfairly used one jurisdiction as an example, but the larger cities oftentimes don't have affordable housing. So because they have an issue, then the state decided we all should study this and make sure that we're not creating an issue with our zoning and land use, which you're not.
Yeah.
So,
What, it had a big impact on the school financial budget this year. Because we used to get extra money because we were low income
right.
and the assessed value, we lost all that.
Back to the city too.
Yeah, that was a big impact.
Sure was.
And that's why I was talking with school board about going to the legislature and raise that level back up accordingly, because it doesn't, it's like 400,000.
and the income levels that they use for those programs may or may not be the same as what they dictate to us for the land use capacity analysis. They may be
I'm
different.
just saying how development has really impacted our local schools. In city.
It's been out of the city, out of city development.
It's outside city
That they
limits.
didn't count for. And 2 classrooms were like years ago.
Yeah, my daughter lives in an area where 111,000 is considered low income. Never understand that.
Not far off everywhere anymore.
So, but the lowest of the income brackets captures everybody. It's the 0 to 20% AMI.
Yeah.
And those are usually the assisted housing and that sort of thing, but that's part of the analysis too. So there's always gonna be a 0 to 20% regardless of where the median income is. And then there'll always be a 20 to 40 and a 40 to 60 and a 60 to 80. Those numbers will all change, but the 0 to 20 will always cover 0. So.
So that takes you to your retired people that they living on 50,000, but they sold their house in Richfield and moved up there and bought $1 million house. But their household income is only 60,000. That's what's happening. A lot of it. They're moving out of your Seattle area, coming down here, retiring. And driving our housing costs up and up.
Taxes.
And taxes.
Well, and so the analysis didn't capture that.
Yeah.
You know, but that is one of the things that we were finding is that because we have. So you look at the housing affordability index, which is a measure of how affordable your housing is compared to your income levels. And we're at about an 85, whereas other larger jurisdictions are typically up around 90 or 95. So that higher the number, the less affordable your housing is. So one of the things that the report did show is not so much because that's a double impact, because you're bringing somebody down with little or no income, but they also have a lot of disposable income to buy a house. So the housing market is on supply and demand, right? If somebody's got $1 million to pay for a home, then you can sell a home for $1 million. But if not, then guess what? The house doesn't cost $1 million anymore. So you're having a double impact on that because they can afford to pay more for housing. So they're driving up the housing cost, but yet they're bringing in little income. So they're really not driving up your census reported income levels because they're not making any money, but yet they're buying housing. So that's an interesting.
Nor do they go for the levies.
No, they don't go for levies.
They don't.
That's interesting.
It is.
But we can't stop people from doing that.
No, and the report didn't capture that because there's no way to know that. I don't know how I could have introduced, I'll have to think about that for a while, see if there's data I can capture that might.
Maybe from the NAR.
Well, that's the frustrating thing is that that's great that they're thinking about that, but it's so detached from reality. It's not even, and no offense, but it has.
That's true.
It has no traction because the reality is you want to sell out Seattle and move to Toledo and do just what Mary was talking about, that report is meaningless.
It typically is, yeah.
It really is. And unfortunately, we waste a lot of time on those instead of saying, hey, this is reality. The apostolics are gonna build a 200 house subdivision up here on the hill, and it's gonna change this entire place. Even.
Well, it's 100 lots, but
Yeah, that's their foots in the door.
I think the other thing that is interesting for Toledo is we have like the best internet and it's expanding out, but for me, when we moved back, I literally couldn't live anywhere else because I work remote, so I almost had to come to Toledo to live and buy land. And so I don't even, like, my income doesn't come from here, it comes from King County.
Well, it's funny you say that because that's one of the first things that we started talking about, been 3 years now.
Yeah.
Talking about impact fees. Because we became a go-to place rather than some hick spot off the side of the freeway. When people learned that we had the best internet in the state. And all those people during COVID that worked remotely and found out I don't have to go to the office, but maybe one day a week. Started saying, now I can really go look for some place to live.
Look how cheap it is there.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And we got a lot of people that moved to town that are just like that said, I'll be a councilman because I don't have to go anywhere else.
And no impact fee, and
no impact
you're gonna
fees.
build with no impact fees, it would cost $20 to build a house. $20 plus whatever the county charges for the inspections.
Yeah, until we took over building permits this last year. It was a matter of point, you came in, you sent your $20 and they sent you to the county, then the county charged you $4,000. And the county, in a personal phone call to me, said, we don't check any of your stuff, we figured if you issued them a permit to come to us, you're already done, so. Yeah, all we're
Yes.
doing is taking the money. We said, we gotta put a stop to that. So now we have an inspector and we issue our own permits, so the city gets
Let's put a
revenue
stop
from
right
that.
there. You know.
So,
Stop sign.
so Chair Burge, the
Yes,
only
sir.
thing that I was looking for on this item was any comment. I have to finalize this. This is part of our comp plan update. It's a required element of the comp plan process. It's a deliverable to the state. I was not planning on taking this report to council. It doesn't really have an impact. It has an impact on the decision making in a lot of communities, but because of the findings in it here, it doesn't really have that much of an impact. Zoning and land use controls aren't going to solve the problem. So it'll come to council as part of the packet with the comp plan.
Right.
But I was looking for direction here from you all if this needed to change before it becomes a final work product and submitted to the state.
I personally think you can put it back in your briefcase, go do what you have to do and submit it to the state.
Yeah.
Second,
All
second
right.
that,
It doesn't need a formal action or anything like
Yeah.
that, but as long as you're all in concurrence that this meets the criteria that the community has for a housing needs assessment, then I will submit it as a required deliverable to the state as part of the process.
Okay,
And it's great discussion too,
yes,
as always.
actually, it's nice to get the audience involved sometimes.
yes.
Number 8, unfinished business, it was moratorium on building permits. We both spoke about that briefly. Last meeting, and it's one of those last things you ever want to do if you could avoid it. We have nothing down the pipeline that's going to interfere with that, so I would prefer that we table it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can look at it a month at a time. Don't you think?
I think so.
Yes, whatever you
Right.
like.
Yeah, I think so too.
I,
Moratorium on the building permits tabled until next time.
Right.
so I think by tabling it or just taking it off the discussion, that is a lot better for a community than actually trying to proceed with a moratorium on development, unless there's a real urgent need to do so. Which I don't feel from a permitting standpoint, reviewing all your permits and things that come through, so I would suggest, I would definitely support Chair Birch's.
Backstory is our current zoning laws allow just about anything. And, Kurt Reddick and his apartment house that he wanted to put down there. Quite truthfully, could have told us to pound salt, said, I meet all the criteria, you have to give me a building permit, and if you don't, I'm gonna sue you and I'm gonna win, and he's right. And he brought it to a public hearing, he got some feedback from the city, he changed his plans for us, and bless him for doing that. But quite literally, nothing prevents somebody who doesn't care about our city one iota from doing the same darn thing. But we have enough time to look at that. We had considered saying, okay, well, why don't we put a moratorium on single and double, limited to single and duplex in the downtown core until we get this thing rezoned. And we prefer not to issue a moratorium or ask the city council to issue a moratorium. So we're going to take it on a month by month basis. See where we are, see what's coming down the pike. If it's the last ditch thing that we have to do that, it's in our back pocket, but I prefer not to do that. So any other public comment before we close the show? Yes, ma'am.
I have two, just for Carly's benefit, can you reaffirm that you're having a workshop next month?
We are reaffirming we're having a workshop at 5 o'clock before planning commission next month.
Thank you. And my second one, what's the status of the annexation? Is it complete?
So
Go for it.
I'm trying to get better, Chair Birch, honestly.
No, you are better.
This all started out, Todd is like the best forward planner you're ever gonna want in your life. And I spent most of my 35 years in development answering to people like Todd. And going before planning commissions and building subdivisions and roads and bridges and things like that. So it's kind of funny. He covers all the bases that I don't know that much about. And hopefully on the other side, I cover all the bases he doesn't know very much about. And it's a very good working relationship. So whenever you need to take over, you take over.
Thank you, Chair Birch. I'll try to continue to ask for permission before I address public questions. The annexation, it's made it through the Boundary Review Board at the county. During that process, the Boundary Review Board was receiving comments that we needed to include a roadway section. It's the section of Toledo Vader Road that would have been, made an island by the annexation. So I brought that to council in an informal question about, do we want to do this? They said yes, so the applicant then revised the boundaries of that. And then the boundary review board did not invoke jurisdiction, which saved us months of process. But now that we have an amended boundary, I need to bring that back to council for council consideration and final approval. And then that will get submitted to the state. So I believe it's August 5th that we're scheduled for council to have them amend the boundary and take final action on the annexation. And then once that's done, 15 days later, it will be effective locally, and that will be the September 1st deadline. And then we'll also file that with the state before that September 1st deadline so that we can begin to collect taxes on that as of January of next year.
And that piece of road is from Toledo Vader from Plumondon to 505. And we now own the entire road, both sides. We will. And the nice thing about that is when the modifications go in from the subdivision up there, come down 505, it won't be the county deciding it's good enough. It'll be us deciding that it's not, that it's good enough. So I think that we'll care more about that a little bit than the county will.
Yes.
Okay, without further discussion then, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So,
Seconded.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion. Meeting adjourned.